You open your phone to check your bank balance, but your thumb hovers. You don't really want to know. So you close the app and open something else. A delivery service, a shopping site, a screen full of things that could arrive tomorrow and make tonight feel different. You tell yourself you deserve this, and you do. But then you do it again the next night, and the next. And somewhere underneath the packages and the confirmation emails, you notice a quiet pattern. You aren't buying things. You are buying a few hours of not feeling what you don't want to feel. This looks like poor self-control, but it's actually something else entirely. It's a very human response to emotional pain, and once you see that, everything changes. Let me say this clearly. You are not bad with money. You are not broken. You are not undisciplined. Spending to forget makes perfect sense. Your brain is not trying to ruin you. It is trying to protect you. It has learned that when certain feelings arrive, anxiety, emptiness, exhaustion, loneliness, a small purchase creates a small escape, and that escape feels better than sitting alone with whatever is underneath. So the behavior is not irrational, it is emotional survival, and survival strategies are not flaws, they are adaptations. So before we go any further, take that in. You are not the problem. The problem is that your brain found a tool that works too well and now uses it for everything. Here is where it starts. You finish work. You are tired in a way that sleep does not fix. You sit down and the silence is loud. Or you open social media and see everyone living lives that look lighter than yours. Or you remember something someone said 3 days ago that still stings. And instead of feeling any of that, you open an app. You scroll. You see a jacket, a candle, a gadget, a book you will probably not finish. And for 3 seconds, you imagine a version of tomorrow where that thing arrives and everything feels a little better. You click buy, and for an hour, you feel relief. That is not shopping, that is emotional regulation. Psychologically, this is called affect labeling through consumption, but in simple terms, you are using a transaction to change your internal temperature. The brain does not distinguish well between physical pain and emotional pain. Both activate similar regions, and both respond to rewards. A small purchase releases dopamine. That dopamine does not solve the original problem, but it temporarily numbs it. And numbness, when you're hurting, feels like peace. Think about the last time you had a terrible day at work. You walked out feeling unseen, undervalued, exhausted. You did not need another coffee mug, but you bought one anyway. Or you ordered food you didn't even want, or you upgraded something that worked perfectly fine. In that moment, you are not making a financial decision, you are making an emotional one, and the feeling of clicking place order gave you back something the day took from you, a sense of control, a small yes when everything else felt like no. That is not weakness, that is your brain trying to balance an internal scale that got tipped too far. And here's the part that matters. This behavior once helped you. Maybe you grew up in a home where feelings were not safe to express, so you found small ways to self-soothe, a candy bar, a small toy, a cheap distraction. That kept you going. Or maybe you went through a period of real scarcity where you had nothing, and now the ability to buy something, anything, feels like proof that you're okay. Spending became a reassurance ritual. Or maybe you learned early that no one was coming to comfort you, so you learned to comfort yourself with things. That was not wasteful. That was creative survival. The problem is not that you learned this. The problem is that the world around you is now designed to exploit it. Every app, every notification, every one-click checkout is engineered to remove the pause between feeling and buying. So what started as a gentle coping mechanism became a reflex. But here's the part most people miss. Spending to forget is not really about the things you buy, it's about the gap you're trying to close. The gap between how you feel and how you want to feel, between where you are and where you wish you were, between the life you have and the life you thought you would have by now. And money becomes the bridge, except the bridge doesn't lead anywhere. It just circles back to the same empty room, and then you need to buy something else to leave again. That's the loop. And it's exhausting not because you lack willpower, but because you are trying to solve an emotional problem with a financial solution. And those two things speak different languages. The brain does something unexpected here. It confuses anticipation with resolution. When you imagine buying something, your brain releases dopamine. When you actually buy it, you get a smaller release.
And when it arrives, you get almost nothing. So you're chasing a feeling that only exists in the moment before you spend. That's why the package sits unopened. That's why you forget what you ordered last week. You were never attached to the thing, you were attached to the escape. And once the escape is over, the thing is just a thing, and the feeling you were running from is still there. So you open the app again. Now here is where identity shifts over time. In your 20s, spending to forget looks like Friday night takeout and impulse clothes. It feels spontaneous, almost social. In your 30s, it looks like upgrading devices, buying better furniture, convincing yourself you're investing in quality. In your 40s, it looks like convenience subscriptions, premium versions of everything, and purchases you justify as self-care. The behavior doesn't disappear, it just gets more sophisticated. Because as your income changes, your brain keeps the same coping mechanism but gives it more expensive clothes. And that's important to see, because if you've ever thought, once I earn more, I'll stop this, you now know the truth. You will not stop. You will just spend more to forget bigger things. The income changes, the mechanism stays. And yet, this behavior is not all damage. It has a hidden function. It reduces stress in the shortest possible timeline. When uncertainty is high, spending creates a microdose of certainty. You click, you own, you control. For a moment, the chaos outside becomes smaller than the package inside. That is not nothing. That's a real psychological reward, and your brain is not wrong to want it. The problem is only that the reward fades too fast, so you need more frequency, more novelty, more value. The brain builds tolerance just like it does to any other numbing agent. And eventually, what once worked stops working, and you're left with the original feeling plus the new one, shame. But shame is not the path out. Understanding is. When you see that you are not weak but simply human, something shifts. You stop fighting yourself. You stop calling yourself names. You stop making budgets you will break by Wednesday. And instead, you just notice. You notice that you're reaching for your phone when you're tired. You notice that the urge to buy arrives right after a difficult conversation. You notice that you spend more on days when you feel unseen. That noticing is not judgment, it is data. And data does not demand change, it just asks to be seen. So here's what is actually true about you. You are not broken. You learned to use money as a blanket because no one taught you a different way to hold the cold. That learning kept you safe. It got you through nights that would have otherwise swallowed you whole. And it still works, just not as well as it used to. That is not failure, that is evolution. Your relationship with money is not a test you're failing. It's a story that is still being written. And the next chapter doesn't begin with you fixing yourself. It begins with you forgiving yourself for needing the escape in the first place. Because you didn't wake up one day and decide to spend your feelings away. You learned it slowly, quietly, in a world that gave you few other tools. And that makes sense. That makes you human. And that is more than enough for tonight.